Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day, there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And I am very excited about today's guest because she has such an interesting topic. So please join me in welcoming Helene Cahen to our program. How are you doing today, Helene?
Hi, Deb, and I'm also super excited for a conversation.
Cool. I love it. Well, let me tell people just a little bit about you. So Helene Cahen is an innovation strategist, trainer, facilitator, and speaker with over 20 years of experience helping companies navigate innovation challenges. She is the founder and principal consultant at Fire Up Innovation Consulting, where she guides Fortune 500 companies, small businesses, and nonprofits to understand innovation, create innovative new products and services, build effective teams, and support a user-centered culture. Helene recently wrote Fire Up Innovation, Sparking and Sustaining Innovation Teams. So welcome to our program.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Well, I always like asking our guests how they got to where they are today. And I'm guessing your story is going to be very interesting, especially because you don't sound like you're from, say, Colorado.
And it's really hard to hide. If you haven't guessed, I'm originally from France. I'm from Paris. And I was born and raised a city girl, Parisian girl, and went to school, went to business school. And then out of business school, I was trying to find the most creative job you can do out of business school. And so I ended up in advertising and worked there for a few years, worked for big packaged good companies, Nestle, Unilever, Kraft, and all that. And loved it. And then I moved to the US almost 30 years ago. And continue working in packaged good. I work in Clorox in marketing research for and then I had kids and decided to start my own business to have more flexibility and have a chance to actually see my kids. And for a few years, I did marketing research. And then I was like, I'm so good at it and I'm so bored with it. And so I decided to go back to school. Pregnant with my third kid, going back to school, and got a master in an MS in creativity and change leadership. And that put me on a new path, which is really the path of innovation, which I always loved. I always loved change and new products, new ideas. And so I become an innovation strategist and been done that for approximately 20 years.
Wow. I love it. Well, let's kind of start at a basic. What is your definition of innovation?
Okay, that's a really good question. And there's a lot of definition of innovation. For me, it's creativity and change that is applied in a useful way. So in a way, it's applied creativity. And I see it in a place for businesses, obviously, but also any organization, because at the core of innovation is change. And we are, in a society, we're going through a lot of change too. So I think innovation is critical for all of us. And thinking about innovation is actually important because it will help us be able to deal better with change. If we understand how it works, if we understand the thinking, if we understand how can we work together when we create change together. And that's why I'm so passionate about this.
Teams, I love it.
Helping teams.
Well, I think one of the things that scares people the most is change. And so many times, like if you ask somebody at a business, why are you doing something that way? They will say, because it's how we've always done it. And they don't want to change. They certainly don't want to innovate. And so how do you get them to realize that if they don't innovate and grow, they might as well just stop doing business?
Exactly that, because we're in a world, especially right now, things are changing a lot around us.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we think, well, we just do business as usual and everything is changing around us, business
Mm-hmm.
as usual is not usual anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And there might be more competitors, there might be new models, there might be
Mm-hmm.
new things you have to integrate,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's AI or new science discovery. And if you don't do it, then new business as usual is going to be down to the point that there be no business. And we know, big companies that just try to do business as usual, talk about Blockbuster, for example, those people don't exist anymore.
Right.
Because if in a world that change, we need to. So innovation is not an option.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's funny, we are part of C-Suite Network, and our founder, Jeffrey Hazlett, was the chief marketing officer for Kodak.
Yeah.
And Kodak is one of the, now, luckily they still exist, but they were one of the big companies that went digital. Why would anybody want to do digital photography? They completely resisted that. You mentioned Blockbuster. I don't think they ever thought that people would use their computers and their phones. I don't even know if we had smartphones when some of this started, but to watch movies. I mean, they just assumed that we would still trot our little selves down to the Blockbuster stores and rent, DVDs and VC, and VHS tapes. It never occurred to them that that would happen. But of course, what was happening was everybody inside and outside those big companies were saying danger, 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 and they ignored it. So is that what you find typically happens, is people just really think, no, it's not going to happen to us, or we're too big to have that happen to us?
It's just that the bigger the organization, the more it's a big machine. And so it's really hard to move it.
Right.
And there's so many assumptions that are baked in that is really hard. You have to create change, you have to challenge the assumptions. So one of the assumptions is like, well, people are continue to put a cassette in the VCR machine. Big assumption. But if we don't challenge that assumption, then you won't even see what you miss. And thinking about it, it's interesting because I remember when Netflix started, they we sent mailing you those little DVD things.
Right. You got them in the red envelopes.
But they were able to realize this is not where it's going and totally change the model and streaming, and now they're actually making series and things like that. So they were the counterexample of things change and they adapted really quick and now at the front end of that change, whereas a company just totally missed it.
Right. And of course we saw that to a huge amount when COVID hit. When all of a sudden most companies could not do business like usual. And I still laugh. I mean, it's been several years ago now when, remember, they told us it'll be 2 weeks and we all went, yeah, no. But yeah, we were supposed to be locked down for 2 weeks. Everything was going to be all better. And, of course, the tricky part was we didn't have a lot of time to prepare. I mean, people were at work on Friday and at home on Monday. I mean, it was that fast. But yeah, so many companies could not, unless you were considered essential, you had to completely change your business model. Now, some of it was temporary, but a lot of it was, we're never going back to the way we did things. So, talk to us about that, because I find that so fascinating, because obviously there were so many companies that just refused and they're not here.
Yeah. And I mean, it's how do you adapt to, I mean, change is going to happen. The question is how you adapt to change and how flexible you are and how you build an organization that allows for change or doesn't allow it. Because I'm sure somebody at Blockbuster has some ideas of other things.
Right. They had to be going, hey, have you heard about this thing called Netflix?
But in the culture, I mean, at the top, the biggest level of, I can work with team, but if the culture is not supportive, it's not going to work. So what does a culture do when something new emerges?
Right.
At least it might not be everybody in the company, but at least have a place where they can consider it, or they kill it right away. And if you kill all the possibilities, maybe 99.9% are really bad, but there is that 0.1% that might be like, you're just going. And so you need to have a place when those new thoughts, those new ideas, those challenging the paradox or challenging the assumption has a place and can be there and can be nurtured to the point that we can see if it's actually, it might be viable. It might be where things are going.
Right.
And so the culture is really, really important.
So how do you help a company develop that culture?
that actually is the hardest level.
First, of course, they have to believe that they need it. So we're going to go with the assumption that they go, okay, we probably should think about this.
You know, for me, the killer question is ask people what happened when you fail.
And you talk about that a lot in your book, is what happens when we fail.
Exactly. So if it's a company that can, and you can put parameter, it doesn't mean you have to fail big.
Right.
But when you fail, is it going to be a place when, one, you can acknowledge you fail, two, there's a place for lesson learned, three, ideally you will actually be acknowledged and appreciated because you try something new, versus a company when if you fail, you're just going to put under the carpet, make a story around it and hope nobody notices it.
Right.
And that's really, and that is I mean, often start from the top. It's like, what our attitude? How do we measure people? How do we give people? I mean, I believe everybody's creative, but if there's not a place in organization when you can come to a meeting or your boss and say, hey, I have this idea, or what about that? And if it's shut down every single time, creativity, you kill the possibility for new things. So it's, and that's a hard one because I can train teams. They can have the best process. They can be, you know, the innovation team doing great. But when it goes up to the structure of the organization, it's a lot of, no, we don't want to take risks. We don't do things that way. It's too risky. Then innovation is going to be killed. So it's not an easy challenge. And it's sometimes hard. If you're new to an organization, sometimes it's hard to really get a feel for it. But over time, you will. And it might be, sometimes it's corporate dependent, kind of the whole organization. Sometimes it might be certain team have different culture. So it really depends, but it's really important.
Yeah. You know, and I love that because we are going to fail. I mean, you know, it's just, it's a given fact of life, you know, and sometimes the fail is because we refuse to change, you know, but yeah, I mean, think about things like, you know, a restaurant tries a new menu item. People are either going to love it or they're going to hate it. But, you know, maybe there's a lot in between, but, you know, and so when they love it, it doesn't really tell you a lot. But when it fails, then they're like, oh, okay, well, people said they wanted more cheese, more veggies, they wanted different meat. I mean, all these various things. And then you can create a second new menu item, you know, as opposed to just, well, that didn't work. You know, but we see like big companies, you know, Google tried 3 different times to have a social network, right? And, you know, and we all thought, well, it's got to be successful. They're Google, you know, and it never took off. I mean, that was what was really funny. And I mean, you know, they were competing against Facebook. They were competing against, at that point in time, definitely LinkedIn, you know, all sorts of things. And they just never found that secret sauce. I think Facebook launched their own smartphones, if I remember right. And, you know, aside from being fun little collector pieces, those do nothing now. But they all learned from those. And it's so interesting that you say that we absolutely have to do that. We have to learn from our failures.
Yeah, and one thing I suggest to teams is like, instead of kind of not considering failure, build failure in it. It's like, win this project, we will fail at some point. How do we build that? How do you take that into consideration? Maybe it's time. Maybe that's why I'm a big believer of prototyping. Back to your menu question.
Right.
So I have an item on the menu, and yeah, people give you, I want all this, and when you put together, they don't like it. Like, what do you learn from it? Again and again and again, and maybe by the 10 times iteration of it, you might get something that people like. But if you kind of don't want to even consider the possibility of failure, then it really, then you might end up make bad decision, or just take the less risky path because this path is less risky, less likely to fail, but maybe just only give us a very small increment in terms of growth or something. So it's always a trade-off. But I think if you can just say there'll be failure, how do you make it so it's not too expensive and it's not too time consuming, and how we failure in a way that is manageable for us.
Right. I love that. You know, I think that the problem is we associate failure, we're going to be embarrassed. It might cost a lot of money. I mean, all of those things. And so, like you said, you need to mitigate those. and say, okay, well, it cost us this, but we can recoup that. And I still remember, so I live in Atlanta, which is the home of Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And it's been a while, but they take this product, which everybody loves, right? Everybody loves Coca-Cola, and they changed the recipe and they called it New Coke. Remember? And we all went blah. It was an abysmal failure. And so then they brought back classic Coke because people like that. And then pretty soon they just got rid of poor New Coke. But yeah, but there were things that came out of that were good. And different variations, things like that. And it's always interesting when I go down to the Coke Museum and see how in different cultures what things, what they like one of the most popular flavors in other countries is orange. And it's, and I've tasted it, and it's like nasty cough syrup type of thing, but they taste our Coke and go, ugh, that's nasty. So sometimes you turn your failure into a success.
Yeah. And so it's really saying we'll fail somewhere, somewhat in that process, but that doesn't mean ultimately we might succeed, but let's be sure that failure is there and we can fail early and quickly, which is why, you test, you get feedback, and then you're like, okay, there's this thing that is a little off. Let's try another iteration and all. And let's not assume that we're just going to hit the first time.
Right.
And that really helps. And also that you're talking about people not being comfortable with change, because there is ambiguity with change and there is a risk of failure. If you bake it and you say, well, you know what, we probably have to go at it several times, so it might take us 6 months to get there, because we'll do a first test and we'll see what happened, and then we'll do a second and a third and a fourth, and then maybe we'll get there. Then it helps being more comfortable, because now it's less ambiguous and less it's part of the process in a way.
Right. What do they say? Thomas Edison tried 1,000 times before he actually invented the light bulb. Now that's a lot, but that could also, I've never read up on exactly how they figured the 1,000. Was that just a tiny little tweak, so that counted as a new one? I mean, it's not like he did, I don't think, 1,000 different types of light bulbs. But the thing that impresses me about it is the persistence, and I think that is something that so many people forget, that we can just keep trying.
Yeah, and even companies, they tend to be like, okay, we have this innovation team and we give them a year and a half. And if they fail, then the team won't exist anymore. And you can see how they structure, like an internal team works for it and they're full, independent. And then, it doesn't work. So we put it back in our system. And it's just kind of like, it's hard to be patient. And also, the timing is not necessarily as on a regular business project. It can be really easy to have a tight timing and know we can achieve it. But innovation, it's not linear. It's not even a funnel. It's messy and it goes up and down. And sometimes it's great. And sometimes it's like, oh, we hit something. It's like something's not working. We have to go back to the drawing board, go back to our ideas, or go back to the problem, or go back to maybe that's the wrong segment, or look at a financial model or something.
Right.
So
Right.
have to be really understanding that it's not a straight journey.
Right. It's interesting. In today's news, they were here in Atlanta, they were talking about the fact that there is an online process to apply for college student aid here in the state of Georgia. And they redid the system. And it doesn't work. And it was a huge failure. I mean, it wasn't just, oops, it didn't put some of the right fields in. The reporter was saying that his son, who is a senior in college or senior in high school, so he needs this financial aid, what the system told him was try again in 6 months. He'll be in school by then. I mean, and so somewhere along the line, something didn't quite get tested right, is my guess. But I think a lot of it is we do try to rush. And, but at some point you have to say, send it out. We've got to just do trial and error with the masses.
Yeah, but I don't know that they needed to have it for how many million of students before.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was like, oh, yeah, I would have gone to like maybe 100. And I didn't, again, I didn't read the story. So I have no idea. I mean, it might have worked just fine for their focus groups. And then, something, and it could be, some little glitchy thing happen with, because these programs are so sensitive. But yeah, it was, they said, and they said it didn't work for anybody. And so yeah, that was a major oops.
Nationwide, because my son is also
Oh no.
yeah, they're like, a lot of schools are delaying by 2 weeks because they understand that people are not able to complete the forms.
Right.
So,
Well,
yeah.
and what they were saying, what the reporter was saying is it may actually change the mind of where his son goes to college. Because if they're not sure what financial aid they're going to get, they've got to make some decisions. Now it's still fairly early. I mean, it's April, but I mean, most kids decide by May, right, where they're going to go to college.
Most of those colleges are May 1st, except
Yep.
some
Oh
I know
yeah.
they've extended to May 15th for the same reason. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's shocking. It reminds me when we changed the healthcare system,
Mhm.
insurance, and there was all people were trying to get on the,
Mhm.
and you couldn't go through, you couldn't fill
Right.
the form on
Mhm.
the 5 hours wait on the
Mhm.
phone. It was horrible.
Mhm. Mhm. Right. Or all of the people that could not buy their Taylor Swift tickets, right? And but it's some of it is definitely hindsight. You look back at it, say Taylor Swift, and kind of go, well, we probably were going to have hundreds of thousands of people hit the website at the same time, and could we take that capacity? Or same with healthcare. It wasn't going to be 1,000 people. It was going to be hundreds of thousands of people. And, now I don't know how you test if your system can do that. There's got to be, these really smart people that know how to do that. But yeah, some of it is, and it's exactly what maybe somebody was saying, hello, excuse me, and they got ignored because for whatever reason, maybe it was we've invested too much time, too much energy, we've announced it, we have to go forward. Well, sometimes you just got to say nope.
Yeah, and it goes to something, and I don't know that it's the case, but who is
Mm-hmm.
in the innovation team?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Team diverse enough to have all the functions?
Mm-hmm.
Because I say, oh, those people are just going to need to apply the program, and they
Mm-hmm.
went on the road up front, and they could
Mm-hmm.
tell you when you scale it up to from 10,000 to a
Mm-hmm.
million, they're very problem. But if
Mm-hmm.
they were not in the room for the discussion, then that came later,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Which is why I really believe that the more diverse your innovation
Mm-hmm.
team is, the more you might kind of
Right.
see all those aspects of a
Mm-hmm.
challenge and solve it, rather than
Mm-hmm.
solving pieces of the puzzle but missing some of them because it's like, oh, this is for later, this is
Mm-hmm.
just implementation, we don't need to talk to the IT person yet, or we don't need
Mm-hmm.
to talk to whatever. And then when they're there, it's like, oops, it's going to take 6 months, so it's not, we can't do it for a million
Mm-hmm.
people or whatever that is.
Right. Right. Well, you've mentioned several times an innovation team. How do we build an innovation team?
So well, it's sometimes they built with being full awareness. Sometimes it's kind of random. It's like, okay, we think that we need those 3 people in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, one of the things I really believe in is being really, really be thoughtful about who should be on the team
Okay.
and why.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe in diverse team in a lot of areas of
Mm-hmm.
diversity. From different jobs,
Mm-hmm.
because to what I was saying is we need to have sometimes, we just need to get the marketing and the R&D
Mm-hmm.
there. It's like, yeah, but if we don't have the sales, if you don't have the
Right.
engineering, if you don't
Mm-hmm.
have the manufacturing, we might discover stuff a year later, 2 years later, that we could have gone up front. So
Mm-hmm.
what are the function? What level of experience do people
Mm-hmm.
have? And yes, we want people that have experience, but maybe some people that have less experience are the
Mm-hmm.
people that are going to ask the right question because they don't
Mm-hmm.
know and they don't make those assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
The other part is, we talked a lot in the US about diversity and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And that is also important because the solution need to appeal to everybody
Mm-hmm.
in your segment. And so if your team is kind of missing some dimension of it,
Mm-hmm.
likely that your outcome might also
Mm-hmm.
miss some critical dimension of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is really important,
Mm-hmm.
talking about people with disability or people of color or like different people, so they can really have that breadth of perspective, so the problem can be really solved from different aspects of it.
Right.
And then the last one that is not talked so much about, but it's a diversity of thinking, because innovation is about solving problems, and there's different ways that we think problem. There is different way we think about solving problem, and so if we have people that all think the same way, then we might
you're going to solve it one way.
Exactly.
I love that. And it's so interesting and obvious, it's kind of one of those but we don't do it, right? Or we wouldn't be talking about it, to have all of the diversity. I was talking with somebody about their website, and it was a group of us that were kind of reviewing this website. And I finally said, who's the audience? And he said, well, people over 65, which was not what I was thinking based on the website. And we all went, okay, from that perspective, you can't have white font on black because we couldn't read it. You needed bigger font because we couldn't read it. We needed the button to say call now, as opposed to it was something. And it was just, he designed it for what he thought would work, right? And never bothered to ask, well, hey, you're actually in my demographic. What do you think about this? And so it goes to show that maybe you don't have an innovation team because you might be a one-person shop, but you still have all these things you need to consider.
Yes, and one is the team that can help as you think about the product, and the other part, which is important, is testing. Because even the team will have some biases, and unless you get it out to your target and see what they think,
right,
not what you think is right, you'll have a bad answer. And I get it's I love technology, but I look at all those products sometimes and I'm like, who designed that?
Right.
Like that was a 20-year-old man.
When I can't get the top off of something with my arthritic fingers.
Yeah, and it's like you can't do that because you can interview people, and it's a great way. And I'm a big proponent of ethnographic research and understanding your user deeply. And if you also have some of those demographic in your team, perspective in your team, then you can bring it every time something come up. You don't need to test it. So I think both are really important. But definitely you need to. You should design for the users, and they should be the one that have to make the decision at the end. They're the one that actually purchase it or be in relationship with you, the website or whatever, or not. And so it's really important to get out of our head and our biases and just see what is needed.
Right. Yeah. And if they say, no, it's not like they're attacking you personally. Now you might have a lot of time, energy, all of that invested in it, but you want it to be successful. So, you should take that feedback and go, okay, well, we're going to change this, this, and this. And now what do you think?
Yeah, I really believe that feedback is a gift. You should really take it as like, great, no, I know, and I know early than if I had to not know that for 6 months and then launch my product. So really take it as a gift. Not everything might be relevant. So you can decide that, especially if that one person say that, I was like, okay, now if 20 people say they're really confused on your homepage by the red button on the left, you don't need 200 people to tell you that.
Right. Yeah. 20 is a pretty good sampling when all things are considered.
When you do the earlier prototypes, you can be small. You can show something to 5 people. And if 5 people are confused, that's enough. If 5 people can't get it, then it's probably better to just make some changes that continue to do the same thing.
Right.
So, I really believe that, it's your user should be, I use a lot of design thinking in my work, and I think the users should be really core to whatever you do when you innovate. Otherwise, you're going to miss some really important information. And by the time you get them, you're going to have might be too late or just waste of time. And money.
You've released it to the public going, we don't think this is going to work. But and I remember years ago when I was in college, it was an English class. We wrote some paper and turned it in and every person's, man, he had taken the red pen and we all got, lots and lots of red ink, lots of things that he didn't like. And we must have all had this look on our faces because he said, let me tell you something. They're words. They're just words. They're not your babies. And and that really struck me as, he's right. That it's not usually anything that's going to hurt somebody or cost them their life. And now granted it might cost time, money, all of those things, but the world's probably not going to come to an end over it. Now, and you might lose your job. I mean, things like that. But it's kind of, we need to think a little perspective about some of this.
Yeah, and innovation work is teamwork. So you have different people have different perspective, but at the end of the day, it's not your idea that's getting out, it's the team ideas and with the feedback. So it's really a collective effort. And if you don't see it that way, then it's going to be a power struggle. And then you're going to miss what is really important. It's like,
right.
am I making my users happy? Am I delighting them? Am I offering some value?
Did I solve that pain point?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, and it's like you said, it has to be an open situation. I have to know that if I say that does not work for me, I'm not going to get yelled at. Because then the next time I'm not going to say anything, right? Which is exactly what you said.
Yeah, and thinking about that, there's something I really think is powerful is when you test, especially early, makes prototype that doesn't look really good. Make them rough, because then if you share it with users or customers, they're not going to feel like, oh, well, it looks so...
I spent so much time and money on it, I shouldn't criticize it.
Exactly. But if you look rough, then they'll be on it, and they might be giving you more useful and more honest feedback.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. So maybe the colors aren't quite right or things like that. And
it's just a drawing, or it's just a 3D thing with other craft, or it doesn't have to be like looks like a perfect product, perfect things. Because then you give authorization for people to be like honest and blunt.
Right. Well, and I can see where that would happen, because I would do that. I mean, if somebody said, hey, will you look at this? And I can tell it means the world to them, and they've spent so much whatever on it, I am going to hesitate to say, what do you think about? But if they send me something and say, okay, this is the first draft, what do you think? Then I'm going to be much more likely. Now they might have 10 drafts past that, but I'm going to be more likely to give them some feedback if I think they haven't done a lot of work on it.
Yeah, and that's why early prototype is so important. But yet in corporate, we have a culture of perfection. Even showing to our boss or somebody else, like, oh, it's look half baked, or my papers half baked, or my message half baked. I shouldn't be doing it. But I would say do it. Do it, because you'll get much better feedback. You're going to save a lot of time. Something big's happened, is like it's obvious and you missed it. You'll know whether than spending another 3 months and refining something.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. I love it. And it's I also love that, as we were saying, the diversity aspect. We have to get more people's views. And I've interviewed several people on the podcast talking about diversity. And it's exactly what you're saying. We have to get those other points of view in there. Now, if your market is this right here, this little box of, 55 to 65-year-old women who live in the suburbs, then, going to a 16-year-old male might not, but most people don't, they've got their audience down in their target market, but it's not quite as fine-tuned as that. And you never know, maybe the 16-year-old male is going to go, ooh, I like that.
Well, there's this concept of designing for the extreme, which is actually a very interesting concept. Is the idea that if you design for the middle, talking, used to be the typical woman, 30 to 40 with 2 kids or whatever, you end up kind of a blah product.
Right.
But if you say, okay, who would never buy my product, or who would love my product? And I'm talking to the people that use it all the time. And I'm talking to people that never even heard of it. I might learn something interesting. I think so. So that's in the testing. Testing was extreme. I might also decide to design a product that is a little bit. So you were talking about your demographic, but I think demographic are not enough. So women 55 to 65, that's fine. But let's talk about those women who have been founding a company in the past year, have been on the top 20 CEOs and whatever, and let's talk to them. And then let's talk to the person that maybe is already retired, has really a quiet life, and then see what happened. It might be the same demographic, but we might learn very interesting things. And when we might say, well, design this thing for those really active women that are maybe 65, but they're really active and in the and maybe actually that product might appeal to this other woman that has more quiet life and is more retired, because there might be an appeal to it, would be better than designing for the average woman, 55 to 60. So there is something about having something that is interesting. And by understanding the extreme and thinking about designing for those extreme, you might actually first, your product is, as you develop it and implement it, is going to get more mainstream because it just happened.
Right.
And then it might have some edges that, I mean, when Facebook was created, it was like for the young people or whatever.
Right.
And
it was for the college students to connect with each other.
the quiz on Facebook is the older generation. So things might happen. And so I think it's important to really think about who your users are in a way that is interesting, and sometimes pushing it to not too average, but actually have some edge to it, because the outcome of the product is going to be more interesting.
Right. Yeah, and it's because we talk about, the normal average. I don't know that there is a normal average. I mean, that's the other thing is, if we're thinking, well, it's all women, all, whatever, or, 50%, whatever. I think we are so unique anymore that there's really no middle that we're trying to hit.
I think the behavior is more interesting, because that's where how people act is really, at the end of the day, what's the most important piece of information. Not what they tell you, not what the label is, which is demographic is kind of a label, but really, what do they do? What kind of activities they have, what kind of passions they have. Are they doing a lot of sport or not doing sports? Are they traveling the world or not traveling the world? I mean, those are behaviors, things that people do, not people, because people also sometimes people say things, but that's not what they do. So I believe that behavior is more important than, I mean, just what people claim to be doing or claim to say.
Yeah, like I might say I read so many business books, right? Truth is I don't, or, the people that, well, I always eat healthy and exercise. And then you see them in their cars a half a block from their house going through the fast food place, right? Now, maybe that's the total exception. That might be, they do that once a month because something happened. But, it's usually people are going to have some variations.
Yeah.
So let's talk about.
I love people. It's
almost like they're totally unpredictable. We have to plan on them being unpredictable.
Yeah.
So speaking of unpredictable, what about all the new things that are making changes? I mean, not too long ago, we were talking a lot about, robotics, and of course that has now evolved into AI. So how do you think AI is going to affect innovation?
Well, I think there's two aspects to it. One is people using AI in their current businesses to fasten process, to simplify process, to, look at how many people use ChatGPT for writing something or drafting something.
That's me. Yeah.
So there is that level. And then there is a point when you use AI as part of the innovation process, which is something different. And I think both of those are evolving and evolving quickly. On the innovation, a lot of companies, but all of them are integrating some piece of AI to a very different level, to the level that is just ChatGPT being like an assistant kind of, to having things that are totally delegated or, data that are read through AI, whether it's going to be changing medicine or, changing, there was a TED talk that just got published yesterday about how they use AI to detect illegal fishing or illegal maritime activities with the satellite, so they can have a better sense of what's happening and then be acting. So that's like the fascinating use of AI, for example. I think for me, because I do a lot of innovation process,
Mm-hmm.
I think the question is which part can we use AI for, and which part should we as humans still feel like this should be, we should really be involved.
Right.
I say it might evolve, but I still believe that AI can really help when you so when you innovate, there's 4 things you have to do. The first thing is you have to understand the problem.
Okay.
You have to come up with ideas.
Mm-hmm.
You have to develop them, test them, prototype them, and then finally you have to implement them. And I think, AI at the beginning can really help you kind of digging into the data, maybe trends and things like that. Once again, everything needs to be checked. But I think the team should be deciding which problem is bigger, or which problem should be so I think looking at options, which we call diverging in my world, I think AI can really help. It can be like bringing more ideas, bring more things. When it comes to converging, which is actually making the decision, I think humans should be the one making the decision because there is much more thing that they know, and they can see. They say it might change, but I would be worried about AI making the decision that this is a product you need to launch. I mean, there is system when it's supposed to create your new business plan in 20 minutes, starting from scratch.
Yikes.
Yeah. But there's a context, there's an environment, there's what's possible, and there's the culture of the organization and the value and the know-how, and there's a lot of things. So I think that is still have a place for human to kind of make this decision and really look at and use AI as a kind of an assistant for giving you more options or other perspective, or it's another perspective. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah, it's like you've got another person in the room.
I don't like when AIs become a person, because I think it's not a
it is still tech. I mean, and when we think of it as being, that's where people get a little scared and freaked out. But I think we also need to remember it is only as good as the data that it is looking at. And so if say you're asking it to predict behavior of 20-year-old girls, there's probably going to be quite a bit of data because they're online. They do a lot more. If you say 80-year-old men, they might not have very much that it's having to figure out. And plus it could be wrong, right? The data could just be wrong.
The biggest question is how, and that's the challenge with LLMs right now, is we don't know which data they really use, and we don't have a source.
Right.
So when they get an output, you don't know how do you know if it's right or wrong?
And if you have to go and research it to make sure, well, then you should have just done it to start with.
And then the other thing, and we start talking about synthetic data and synthetic personas. So there's this thing in marketing research, like you used to have focus groups. Now you have to have, fake. I call them fake, but synthetic people that will give you an evaluation of your ideas. And I'm open to considering it, but I would say at this point, if it's a tiny twist. Like, I don't know, I'm a cereal bar and I'm adding a chocolate version to it and I have mint, might be able to do that because there's enough data on it. But if you talk about a product or services that is really going to change behaviors, it's really hard to predict because it's asking for a change of behavior and the data is from the past.
Right.
And we talk about the future.
And our behaviors are not exactly predictable.
Yes. So I think, but there is a lot of talk about synthetic data and synthetic consumers. So I still think that we want to be careful about it, if nothing else.
Right. Yeah. To me, it's just another tool. Like I said, I use it to write. So I will write, say, a marketing paragraph, and then I will put it in there and I will say, please rewrite. And I go, ooh, that sounds pretty good, but I want to change this word, this word, this word, or I'll have it write my blog post, and I'll go, I don't even know what that word means. So clearly I have to change it because I wouldn't use that word. But it is evolving. And so it'll be interesting, 5-10 years from now, just to see what it is. But it is only as good as the data that goes into it. So, I think that's the thing that people, and it is not a person. I think so much of what happens are those little tweaks I don't know if you've seen on Facebook recently, there's been, and I don't know, maybe it's just popping across my feed, but it's an AI program that takes a selfie picture that you have taken and turns it into the best professional headshot ever.
Oh yeah, so that.
Right. And I looked at that and I went, well, it's okay, but it didn't get the right twinkle in the eye, or maybe the right, those tiny little things that working with a professional photographer is going to bring out. Now, if you had to have a headshot and had to have it within, 15 minutes for something, sure. Or maybe you can't afford to go get new headshots done. But it's funny. I started an initiative where several years ago to help those who have cancer. And the main image was saying, because I have cancer, and I'm using what I have to help others, right? And so it starts by saying, "Excuse me, that's not in my schedule." And that's exactly what I told my doctor when she said, "You have cancer." I'm like, "No, I'm sorry, that's not my schedule." But I had used stock photography of this very stern looking woman, right? And I think she's got her arms crossed. And, but so people said, nah, it's got to be you. This website is you, so that picture has to be you. Well, did I have headshots where I was not laughing, smiling? No. I did not have any serious looking, but not bitchy, right? Because there's kind of that fine line in there, right? And so I went back to my professional photographer, who I absolutely love, and said, okay, we need some serious pictures. Now, we had a hard time getting serious pictures because we enjoy spending time with each other. But, I don't know that an AI program, at least as they are today, could have gotten the right look in my eye so that it was, I'm serious, but I'm not really mad, or, those little nuances that we have. And I think the same thing happens in writing, all sorts of things. But the photography is what interests me, because I thought that's very interesting. That's just really popped down on people's Facebook posts.
Well, and you can now have your voice. Like I thought about it. I have my book is on. I can get my book narrated by an AI if I wanted. And I think people would be bored after 5 minutes, frankly.
Well, and now I have a lot of content. I mean, your program 958. So an AI's got a lot of content of me talking to be able to do something, but it's still going to miss those nuances, and especially say when you're reading a book, did you want this word to be surprised, or did you want it to be serious? And, the program's just going to see the word.
Yeah.
So, and even if you tell it, read this serious, because I've gone back in, like with things I've written, give it a sense of humor. And that's always really funny, because then that's one of the ones that gets really wonkadoodle with, its idea of a sense of humor. My idea of a sense of humor is very different, but it is interesting, but it still needs the people. So to me, it is just part of this innovation tool.
Yeah, no, but it's changing a lot. So it's kind of interesting. Now they come up with the voice. It can imitate your voice. So I'm not sure where we're going. It's all interesting and scary and exciting and all of the above.
Yeah. Well, one of the things they've been talking about is the upcoming election. What if you get a phone call from candidate whoever, and it's saying, you don't need to vote today, or please, big thing, they keep talking about this, why won't Taylor Swift, back to poor Taylor, and I'm not a Swiftie, I don't know why this just pops up a lot in my mind, but why won't she endorse a political candidate? Now, one would hope that she is smart enough to go, oh, I ain't going there. But, and I think she probably, you kind of know which way she leans, but for her to come out and say, I endorse X, I just don't know about that. But just think if you started getting phone calls from Taylor Swift saying, I really think you should vote for candidate whoever. A lot of people are going to go, okie dokie. And, maybe it was a total AI generated call.
I mean, we have some calls, AI generated calls telling people not to go vote, and that it's all possible. And I was at TED last year, and there was a demo. I mean, somebody can listen. They had Chris Anderson voice talking. His voice was somebody else talking with it. It was just like, you can do it. So it is scary, and it's like, And in a way, like the only thing that's going to be real is you and I being in the same room together.
Mm-hmm. Right. So that we
Everything
know.
else,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Everything
Mm-hmm.
else is, I don't know, maybe it's not you.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
have a
Yeah, there's a commercial where it's somebody and they're saying is she a robot, and she goes and they go, no, obviously she's not a robot. But
exactly.
yeah, I mean, and now I am a fan of science fiction, and so I do see that at some point, probably not in my lifetime, but there will be synthetic humans that are pretty close. But it, the thing that I don't think any of that can match is what goes on in our brain. I think there's just those little nuances, all of those things. They can come close, but they can't quite get there.
Yeah. Two questions. One, is this important?
Mm-hmm.
And two, and then we can enhance human too, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole group of people that are
Right.
looking at enhancing human
Mm-hmm.
to increase longevity, increase
Mm-hmm.
capacity. So who
Right.
knows? It might be a half cyborg or something.
Right. Right. Oh, part, and we don't want more of me. We certainly don't want it now. Well, I would like to clone myself. No, probably not. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. Well, in your book, you talk about the 5-week innovation challenge. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So it's kind of the end of the book, and I was trying to
Mm-hmm.
find a way to put it together.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I believe that you can talk about innovation,
Mm-hmm.
but you learn best about innovation by doing it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so this was like, well, if you want to, and each chapter of my book has already 1 or 2 practices.
Mm-hmm.
So you can read the chapter and say, hey, I want to try that at my next meeting, or I
Mm-hmm.
want to try to think
Mm-hmm.
about this with my coworker.
Mm-hmm.
But the 5-week experience is like, let's take it to on a little ride
Mm-hmm.
and kind of think about different concepts around innovation. So
Mm-hmm.
each week have a different focus. So the first week
Okay.
is with you.
Okay.
The second week you do it with a partner. It can be
Mm-hmm.
somebody on your team. It can be somebody, can be your spouse, a
Mm-hmm.
friend, whatever. The third week is like
Mm-hmm.
you're looking more of a team.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fourth week, you're looking more about how do you innovate with an impact, you
Mm-hmm.
having an impact in the world. And then the 5 week is like, fifth week, you just
Mm-hmm.
kind of put all those together. So the idea is like, let's just apply.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see how it actually feel. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when you start doing it and you have example of doing it, then it becomes easier to bring this
Mm-hmm.
concept to life in your work, in your personal life, in your communities,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that.
Right. So do you take something that and I deliberately didn't want to cover more of the book because we want people to buy it, right?
Yes.
But so do you take something that's already existing and just see kind of how it would work through the process, or do you start with something totally new?
It's really up to you
Okay.
because it's about filling the blank.
Mm-hmm.
So you can decide to take it on something you're already doing.
Mm-hmm.
You can say, hey, I just want to, like, though I might be saying, let's find an activity that you don't do usually and try to
Okay.
do it every day,
Mm-hmm.
even for 5 minutes or something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to start meditating, or
Mm-hmm.
when I drive to work, I'm going to take a different road
Mm-hmm.
every day and see what happens. Because, I have my kind of
Right.
ways.
I've got my route.
On a different road. You might just find a new bakery
Mm-hmm.
or see that road is better
Mm-hmm.
or discover a new neighborhood or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. So just those kind of things, like
Mm-hmm.
getting your brain to kind of like expand a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Yeah, because we do get caught up in this is the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
And it's a habit, right? I remember years ago I did some Mary Kay makeup thing. And they said, if you do something every day for 21 days, it will become a habit.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably still pretty close. But but it's really hard to break those habits. Whatever it is, because your brain goes, I do this and this, and then I brush my teeth. And the next day I do this and this, and then I brush my teeth. Right. And if you get out of order, it's just so, it's breaking those habits. I love that, and really thinking the what ifs.
Exactly. And some habits are good because you don't want to
Mhm.
reinvent everything all the time.
Right. You should do this, and brush your teeth. Yeah.
Yeah, there's an opportunity. Taking
Mhm.
another road, we might just
Mhm.
cover something new
Mhm.
or having a different discussion
Mhm.
or, asking yourself,
Mhm.
what have a different conversation with a
Mhm.
friend or
Mhm.
come up with 10 ideas on something when usually would just jump to the first one or
Mhm. Mhm.
little thing. That's always like, oh, there is different way I can do
Mm-hmm.
things. And what happened to that?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a mini experience of what you can do
Mm-hmm.
then when you work on innovation
Mm-hmm.
projects.
I love it. Very cool. Very cool. Well, oh my gosh, we've only got about 5 minutes left. So, tell us, Ellen, what, how, first of all, how do they find you? And
Okay.
what are the services that you provide?
So the best way to find me is go to my website, and it's www.fireupinnovation.com.
Mm-hmm.
And so a couple of things. If you go to my website, if you're interested in more tips and more ways to think about innovation, you can subscribe to my newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to give to spam people, so I would only do it like once or twice a month.
Okay.
I get something every 2 days, and I'm like, I can't absorb that much.
Yeah, you can only read so much. Mm-hmm.
So that's the best way.
Mm-hmm.
I also post very like 3 times a week on LinkedIn, so you
Mm-hmm.
can follow me on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to really do content because I think that's what I want to bring, and I
Mm-hmm.
want to kind of provoke people to think. So I will post sometimes, but it's mostly content.
Mm-hmm.
So you can find me on LinkedIn. And then my services is what I do. I do different things. The first one is I really work with innovation teams.
Okay.
And the first thing I usually do is use this tool called Foresight,
Mm-hmm.
which helps you measure. We're talking about diversity of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's my grounding tool, is like it helps you understand what's your preference for those 4 parts of the process we talk about: clarifying, ideating, developing, or implementing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can map the team profile, which becomes really interesting because it really gets into the team dynamic and what happened when we're trying to solve problem together.
Okay.
And it works for innovation team. It can also work for established team because it's still a lot of, even in a regular business team, you still have problems to solve.
Right.
It's the nature of what you do. And so understanding where other team might fall short, it's preferences, it's not
Right.
skills.
They might be missing something.
They might. So, for example, I had a client, and they were the founder was really a visionary, so they had a lot of ideas, and the team was really good at implementing, but the team had very low preference into developing. So the typical pattern is the founder had great ideas, and the team just go and try it, and they had higher rate of failure because they didn't take the time, as we talk about testing, prototyping, get user feedback, and things like that. So that test was really helpful. So then you can build a better process, which is the other thing. I train teams. And so we look at what's a process that we can use, what a process we can optimize, how do we have a common language, how can we facilitate projects, so we move projects along. So I can either train them to do that internally, or sometimes on a more complex project, I can be just facilitator, so nobody has to think about the process. They just have to show up and do the work. Which problem are we going to work on, which ideas, which prototype and solution we can develop. So that's what I do. And I also do coaching because it's innovation coaching specifically, because I learned that I can train a team and it's great and they're all excited, and then life hits. And then things happen that are not.
And we go back to, no, we have to do it the way we've always done it.
Exactly. So coaching is really a way to sustain change and to help the team when they have questions or they get stuck or they don't know how to deal with it at the next meeting, or there's issue with the team dynamic and things like that. So those 3 things go together.
Oh, I love it.
I love to speak at events and conferences. And so if
And on
anybody's
podcasts.
And on podcasts, of course. And I love to talk. So if anybody has events or conferences they're interested in a speaker, I would be glad to be of help.
Very cool. And you've got a blog that has a lot of great content. So I encourage people to go to your website, which again is fireupinnovation.com. And so, just check it out. It's lots of great information there.
Yeah. And then if you want a practical book, the book, I wanted to have a book that is a book to do, not a book to read. So
it is a workbook type of format.
But it's a workbook, but there are also a lot of, because I study creativity and change leadership, there's also a lot of grounding. I don't want people to like, oh, she's telling me to do that, but I have no understanding.
I have no idea what I'm supposed to do.
So it's a mix of understanding why and then being very practical. And there's stories and tips also, because that's how I how I like to
Mm-hmm.
train people, and I wanted the book to represent that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last part is I'm a visual thinker. I
Mm-hmm.
realized that a few years ago. So I wanted to have a lot of visuals. So for those of you who have visual thinker,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of graphics.
It's very colorful.
So that's the book.
I love it. I love it.
Last thing is, if anybody is interested, I love to talk about innovation.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a challenge and you wanted to set up a time, 30 minutes consultation, I'd be
Mm-hmm.
glad to offer that to you listeners.
Very cool. I love it. I love it. Well, this really has been just so much fun and so interesting. I think it's something ongoing. So we'd be, love to have you back on again. But until then, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Well, I think based on what we say is try to break some of your habits and try
Mm-hmm.
to look at things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be try something small, like, take an Euro to go to work,
Mm-hmm.
or, talk about how you can work better with your coworkers, how you can be more open to new ideas,
Mm-hmm.
to change, how you can talk about the assumptions when you go into a project or something. And then it's like, what are the assumptions? And sometimes the assumptions are, I like this one because it's like, oh, we will have to make money. And it's an assumption, but maybe if you say, what if we didn't have to make money, and then see what happened? You might also have to make money, but you might also discover that maybe it's a freemium model. And for some customers, we don't have to make money, but then for the other one, we can make much more money or something like that. So things like seems obvious, good to, challenge assumptions.
Oh my gosh. I love it. I love it. And I can't wait until we chat again. I've been having such a good conversation with Helene Cahen. She is the founder and principal consultant at Fire Up Innovation Consulting. She is also the author of Fire Up Innovation, Sparking and Sustaining Innovative Teams. Until next time, I'm Deb Creer. Everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.